The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of room 317 at Pine Haven Retirement Home. Eleanor Winters sat in her worn armchair, her gnarled fingers resting on a photo album that documented 83 years of a life well lived, though not always well treated. The caretaker had positioned her chair to catch the morning sun, a small kindness that Eleanor appreciated more than anyone knew. Warmth had been scarce in her life, both literally and figuratively. "Mrs. Winters, would you like your breakfast now?" asked Melissa, the young aide whose kind eyes reminded Eleanor of someone long gone. "Not yet, dear," Eleanor replied, her voice carrying the weight of decades, but still maintaining a hint of the melodic quality that once made strangers turn their heads. "I'm traveling today," Melissa's brow furrowed with concern. Residents weren't scheduled for any outings. "Traveling, Mrs. Winters?" Eleanor's weathered lips curved into a mysterious smile as she tapped the album. "In here. The past is a foreign country, didn't you know? And today, I have a long journey ahead." As Melissa reluctantly left to attend to other residents, Eleanor opened the leather-bound album, its spine cracked from years of handling. The first photograph, sepia-toned and creased, showed a small farmhouse with a group of children lined up by height on the porch steps. Eleanor's finger, twisted by arthritis but still precise, pointed to the smallest child, a solemn little girl with braids and eyes too old for her face. "That was the day before everything changed," she whispered to the empty room. 1942, Coal Creek, West Virginia. "Eleanor May, get those eggs collected before your father comes in," her mother called from the kitchen, where the smell of biscuits couldn't quite mask the perpetual coal dust that settled on everything in Coal Creek. 6-year-old Eleanor scurried to the chicken coop, her worn shoes leaving small imprints in the morning dew. The Great Depression had technically ended, but nobody had told Coal Creek. Here, poverty still reigned with an iron fist, and the war overseas only seemed to tighten its grip. As she reached for a brown egg beneath a particularly ornery hen, Eleanor heard the screen door slam. Her father was home early from the mine. That was never good. "They've closed the east shaft," she heard him tell her mother, his voice carrying the hollow tone that Eleanor had learned to fear. 30 men let go, me included. Eleanor clutched the egg basket tighter as she crept back toward the house. Through the window, she could see her mother sink into a chair, one hand covering her mouth, the other instinctively moving to her swollen belly, where Eleanor's unborn sibling grew. "What about the baby? Frank? And the other children?" Her mother's voice cracked like the thin ice on the creek in early spring. "Hendersons are moving to Detroit. Factory work. Said I could come along, try my luck." "Detroit? That's so far." "It's that or starve, Margaret." Eleanor watched as her father's coal-stained hands formed fists, then relaxed in defeat. She didn't fully understand what Detroit meant, but she recognized the tremor in her mother's voice. Change was coming, and in Eleanor's experience, change rarely brought anything good. 2 weeks later, Eleanor stood with her 4 siblings on a train platform, a small cardboard suitcase containing everything she owned, clutched in her hands. Her mother, now 8 months pregnant, leaned heavily on her father as they prepared to board the train that would take them away from the only home Eleanor had ever known. "Remember," her mother had told them that morning, "we stick together no matter what. Family is all we've got." Eleanor would cling to those words in the years to come, even as she watched that very family splinter and crack under pressures no child should have to witness. 1945, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit was a world away from Coal Creek. Instead of mountains, there were endless streets of identical houses. Instead of the quiet broken only by birdsong, there was the constant clanking and hissing of the factories that had sprung up to feed the war machine. For 9-year-old Eleanor, the city had become a maze she navigated daily, weaving between neighborhoods where different languages floated from open windows, carrying the smells of unfamiliar foods. Her father worked 12-hour shifts at the Ford plant, coming home with new calluses to replace the ones the coal mines had given him. Her mother took in laundry and mending, trying to feed 7 children on rations and ingenuity. The baby born shortly after their arrival, a boy they named James, had never been strong. The Detroit air, thick with industrial smoke, did his weak lungs no favors. Eleanor had become his primary caretaker while their mother worked, learning to recognize the wheezing sounds that preceded his bad spells. It was a hot August afternoon when Eleanor heard the familiar wheeze turn into something more frightening. James, now 3, looked at his big sister with panic in his eyes as he struggled to draw breath. "Ma!" Eleanor screamed, scooping James into her arms. "Ma, he can't breathe!" What followed was a blur of activity. Her mother running from the neighbor's house where she'd been delivering mending, the frantic search for the doctor who served their neighborhood, the agonizing wait as he examined James on the kitchen table. "Pneumonia," the doctor pronounced, packing up his bag with a grim expression. "And with his history, you should prepare yourselves." Eleanor watched her mother's face crumple, then harden with determination. "No," Margaret said firmly. "Not my boy. Not after everything." For 3 days and nights, Margaret and Eleanor took turns sitting with James, applying cold compresses to his burning forehead, coaxing sips of broth between his cracked lips, whispering prayers with increasing desperation. On the 4th morning, Eleanor awoke in the chair beside James's bed to find his eyes open, the fever broken. He was too weak to smile, but his tiny hand reached for hers. "He's a fighter," her mother said from the doorway, exhaustion etched into every line of her face, like all of us have to be. It was the first victory Eleanor could remember, a small moment of triumph against the relentless hardships of their new life. She didn't know then how rare such victories would be, or how much fighting would be required in the years ahead. 1952, Detroit, Michigan. "You can't go to college, Eleanor. It's just not possible." Her father's voice was final, the same tone he used when shutting down her brother's requests for baseball equipment or her sister's pleas for new dresses. 16-year-old Eleanor stood in their small living room, the acceptance letter from Wayne State University clutched in her trembling hands. Her high school teacher had helped her apply, recognizing in Eleanor an intelligence that burned bright, despite the circumstances, designed to dim it. "But they're offering a scholarship," Eleanor argued, her voice quiet but determined. "And I could live at home, keep helping with expenses." Her father's face, prematurely aged by years of hard labor, softened momentarily. "Eleanor, you're smart. Always have been. But smart doesn't put food on the table. Rebecca's getting married next month and Sarah's not far behind. That's the path for girls like you." "I'm not like them," Eleanor whispered, immediately regretting the words when she saw the flash of anger in her father's eyes. "No, you're not," he agreed, his voice hard again. "You've got your head in the clouds, but reality's down here, and reality says you finish high school next month and start full-time at the diner. Mr. Grayson already agreed to take you on." Eleanor felt the future she'd carefully constructed in her mind crumble. Nights spent studying by candlelight when electricity had been a luxury, the library books hidden under her mattress, the quiet promise she'd made to herself that she would escape the cycle of hardship that had claimed her parents. All of it seemed suddenly childish and impossible. That night, as she lay in the bed she shared with her youngest sister, Eleanor made a different kind of promise to herself. If college wasn't possible now, she would find another way. She would save every penny, create opportunities where none existed, and never, ever stop learning. She couldn't know then how life would conspire to test that promise, or how many times she would have to renew it in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. 1955. Chicago, Illinois. Eleanor smoothed her uniform skirt and checked her appearance one last time in the mirror of the employee lounge at Marshall Field's department store. 3 years of serving coffee and pie at Grayson's Diner had eventually yielded enough savings for a bus ticket to Chicago and 2 months' rent in a boarding house for working women. The department store job paid better than the diner, and the employee discount meant Eleanor could finally replace the threadbare clothes she'd brought from Detroit. More importantly, Chicago had night schools, where a determined young woman could earn a degree one class at a time. "Winters, you're needed on the sales floor," called the floor manager, a pinched woman who seemed to take personal offense at Eleanor's ambition. "And fix your hair. This isn't a factory." Eleanor quickly tucked a stray strand of dark hair back into her conservative bun and hurried to her position in ladies' gloves. The luxury department had been assigned to her as a test, one the manager clearly expected her to fail. Instead, Eleanor had studied the merchandise with the same intensity she brought to her night classes, learning the difference between kid and lambskin, memorizing which European makers were considered most prestigious. As she arranged a display of evening gloves, Eleanor noticed a well-dressed man watching her from near the counter. Her practiced smile appeared automatically as she approached him. "May I help you find something for the special lady in your life?" she asked, using the script the store had drilled into all salesgirls. The man's answering smile revealed perfect teeth. "Actually, I was admiring your display technique. Very elegant." Eleanor recognized him then. Robert Caldwell, the new junior buyer for accessories who had started the previous month. Rumors about his family connections and Ivy League education had raced through the employee lounge. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. I try to showcase each pair's unique qualities." "You have an eye for quality," he observed, picking up a pair of gloves Eleanor had just arranged. "And you know your inventory." Not every salesgirl bothers to learn the difference between French and Italian craftsmanship. Eleanor felt a flush of pride at the recognition. "I believe knowledge is never wasted, sir." His eyes, a striking blue that contrasted with his dark hair, studied her with new interest. "I understand you're taking night classes at the university." Surprise momentarily rendered Eleanor speechless. Had he been asking about her? "Business administration," she confirmed, wondering if her educational pursuits would be deemed inappropriate for a salesgirl. Instead, Robert Caldwell looked impressed. "Ambitious. I like that. Perhaps you'd allow me to buy you coffee sometime. I could tell you about the buyer training program. We're always looking for employees with potential." As Eleanor accepted the unexpected invitation, she couldn't know she was setting in motion events that would both fulfill and destroy her dreams in ways she could never have imagined. 1960, Chicago, Illinois. "Mrs. Caldwell, Mr. Caldwell is on line 1, announced the secretary's voice through the intercom. Eleanor winced at the formal address. After 5 years of marriage, she still wasn't used to being Mrs. Caldwell in professional settings, especially now that she and Robert worked for competing department stores. "Thank you, Janet," she replied, picking up the receiver. "Hello, Robert." "Eleanor." His voice carried the clipped tone he'd adopted since her promotion to assistant buyer at Carson Peary Scott 6 months ago. "I'm calling about tonight's dinner with the Williamsons. I'm afraid I'll have to cancel." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, controlling her reaction. The Williamsons were influential in Chicago retail circles, and the dinner had been scheduled for weeks. "May I ask why?" She kept her voice neutral, professional. "Last-minute meeting with New York. Unavoidable." The excuse was familiar, increasingly so in recent months. "I see. Would you like me to reschedule?" A pause. "Actually, there's no reason you can't go without me. Bill Williamson is more your connection than mine these days, isn't he?" The implication stung, but Eleanor refused to rise to the bait. "I'll represent us both, then." "Fine. Don't wait up. This meeting will run late." After replacing the receiver, Eleanor allowed herself one moment of complete stillness, absorbing the reality of what was happening to her marriage. Robert had been proud of her ambition when she was his protégé, less so when she became his wife, and downright resentful now that her career was beginning to eclipse his. The cruel irony wasn't lost on Eleanor. She had finally achieved the education and career she'd fought so hard for, only to find that success was creating a different kind of prison. Robert, who had once been her biggest champion, now seemed determined to remind her of her humble origins at every opportunity. That evening, alone at the table with the Williamsons, Eleanor charmed them with her knowledge of European textiles and emerging fashion trends. When Bill Williamson mentioned an executive position opening at their new Minneapolis store, Eleanor felt a flicker of both excitement and dread. Another opportunity, and another battle looming at home. Later that night, as she prepared for bed in their elegant Lakeshore Drive apartment, Eleanor heard Robert's key in the lock. The clock read 1:30 a.m. "How was your meeting?" she asked, watching his reflection in her vanity mirror. Robert loosened his tie, not meeting her eyes. "Productive. How were the Williamsons?" "Delightful. Bill mentioned a position in Minneapolis they think I should consider." Robert's hands stilled. "Minneapolis. How convenient." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, finally turning to face her, "that perhaps you should consider whether advancing your career is worth sacrificing your marriage." The ultimatum hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Eleanor looked at the man she had married, handsome, educated, from a world so different from the one she'd grown up in, and realized with sudden clarity that she had traded one form of limitation for another. "I was raised to believe that with enough determination, one could have both," she said, quietly. Robert's laugh held no humor. "Your coal miner father and his laundress wife. What would they know about balancing executive careers?" The casual cruelty of the remark, dismissing the parents who had sacrificed everything to keep their children fed and sheltered, crystallized something in Eleanor. She had fought too hard to get here. She would not apologize for her success or her origins. "They knew about dignity," she replied, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her. "And loyalty." The implication hung in the air. Eleanor had suspected for months that Robert's late meetings weren't always professional in nature. The perfume that occasionally clung to his suits wasn't hers. Robert's face hardened. "If you take that job in Minneapolis, don't expect me to follow." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And as Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly, they both knew her answer, even before she spoke it aloud. 1965, Minneapolis, Minnesota. "Mom, watch me." 5-year-old Lily called from the playground swing set, her little legs pumping furiously to reach ever higher heights. Eleanor looked up from the bench where she'd been reviewing quarterly projections and smiled at her daughter. "I see you, sweetheart. You're flying." The divorce from Robert had been finalized just days before Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The timing had been almost comically bad. A newly single woman accepting an executive position while secretly battling morning sickness in boardroom meetings. Robert had remarried within a year, his new wife the 22-year-old secretary Eleanor had once suspected. He sent birthday and Christmas gifts to Lily, but had visited only twice in 5 years. Eleanor didn't mind. She had built a good life here for herself and her daughter, finding an unexpected contentment in the balance between her challenging career and the joys of motherhood. As Lily jumped from the swing and ran toward a group of children by the slide, Eleanor felt the familiar pang of worry. Her daughter was outgoing and fearless in a way Eleanor had never been, approaching life with a confidence born of security. Eleanor worked hard to ensure Lily would never know the kind of hardship that had shaped her own childhood. "Mrs. Winters?" Eleanor turned, surprised to hear her maiden name, which she had reclaimed after the divorce. A man stood nearby, his hat in his hands, looking uncertain. "Yes?" she responded cautiously. "James Winters. Your brother." He smiled tentatively. "It's been a long time." Eleanor stared at the stranger, searching for traces of the sickly little boy she had nursed through pneumonia 20 years earlier. His shoulders were broad now, his face tanned and healthy, but the eyes, those were unmistakably the same. "James," she whispered, rising from the bench. How did you find me? He shifted uncomfortably. Mom kept track through friends of friends. She didn't want to intrude, but, well, things are bad, Ellie. The childhood nickname sent a shock through Eleanor. No one had called her that since she left Detroit. What's happened? She asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Dad's gone. Accident at the plant last year. James twisted his hat in his hands. Mom's not well. Cancer. Doctors say it's advanced. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the news. She had sent Christmas cards, the occasional letter, and money when she could afford it, but maintained the distance her father had demanded when she left for Chicago. He doesn't want your charity, her mother had written once, returning a check Eleanor had sent. She's asking for you, James continued quietly. All of you kids, actually, but especially you. Says she has things to make right before... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Eleanor glanced at Lily, laughing as she climbed the slide ladder. The carefully constructed life she had built suddenly seemed precarious, threatened by the past she had tried so hard to outrun. When? She asked simply. Soon, James replied. The doctors say weeks, maybe less. Eleanor nodded, decision made. Let me get my daughter. We'll go home to pack. As she called Lily from the playground, Eleanor felt the weight of the coming journey settle on her shoulders. She was returning to Detroit not as the ambitious girl who had fled its limitations, but as a woman who had fought for everything she had, and who understood finally that some battles couldn't be won through determination alone. 1980, New York City. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't keep working these hours at your age. How did you keep going when everything was against you? Eleanor considered the question, the kind of fundamental inquiry that only came with age and perspective. I believed tomorrow could be better than today, she said finally, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make that true. Sometimes that served me well. Sometimes... She trailed off, thinking of the relationships sacrificed, the personal life subordinated to professional ambition, the years spent proving herself to people who would never fully accept her. Sometimes I was wrong about what better meant, she finished quietly. But that's the privilege of living a long life. You get to reflect, to reassess, to make peace with your choices. Emma was silent for a moment, absorbing her grandmother's words. Are you at peace, Grandma? Eleanor smiled, touched by the young woman's perception. At 80, Eleanor had outlived most of her siblings, her ex-husband, and many colleagues. She had witnessed the world transform multiple times over, from the coal camps of Appalachia to the digital age her granddaughter navigated so effortlessly. Most days, she answered honestly. Though I still wonder about the roads not taken. That's the thing about choices. You never really know what might have been. Like if you'd gone to college right after high school, Emma suggested. Or stayed in Detroit with my family. Or fought harder to save my marriage. Eleanor shook her head. But regret is a poor companion in old age. Better to remember the victories, however small. Emma began carefully repacking the trunk, handling each item with a newfound respect now that she understood the stories behind them. Will you tell Mom some of these stories? I don't think she knows half of what you went through. Eleanor sighed. Lily and I, we've had our difficulties. She saw too much of the cost and too little of the reason. She'd understand better now, and so would I. Emma closed the trunk lid gently. Your story matters, Grandma, not just to our family, but to anyone who thinks their circumstances define their limits. As twilight deepened outside the windows of the comfortable home her daughter and son-in-law had built, Eleanor felt a strange sense of completion. Perhaps this was her final task, not building a career or proving her worth, but simply sharing the truth of a life that had defied expectations at every turn. Tomorrow, she promised Emma, we'll invite your mother for tea, and I'll tell you both the story of how a coal miner's daughter from West Virginia ended up having lunch with Coco Chanel in Paris. Emma's eyes widened. You never mentioned that? Eleanor laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Oh, my dear, there are many stories yet to tell. We've barely scratched the surface. 2019. Pine Haven Retirement Home. The morning light had shifted, no longer warming Eleanor's face as she sat with the photo album open on her lap. 83 years? Documented in fading photographs and carefully preserved mementos. A life that had spanned from the coal fields of West Virginia to the executive suites of New York's fashion world, and finally to this quiet room where the past often felt more real than the present. A gentle knock interrupted her reverie. Mrs. Winters, you have visitors? Eleanor looked up to see Melissa standing in the doorway, and behind her, the familiar figures of Lily and Emma, both carrying packages wrapped in colorful paper. Happy birthday, Mom, Lily said, crossing the room to kiss Eleanor's papery cheek. Is it? Eleanor asked, momentarily disoriented. The days sometimes blended together now, a side effect of age that frustrated her still sharp mind. April 17th, Emma confirmed, setting her package on the small table beside Eleanor's chair. 83 years young. Eleanor smiled at her granddaughter, now approaching 40 herself with her own successful career and family. Hardly young, my dear, but still here, which counts for something. As Lily busied herself arranging flowers in a vase, and Emma pulled chairs closer to Eleanor's, the old woman felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The road had been long and often difficult, marked by hardships that would have broken many. Yet here she was, surrounded by the family she had sometimes neglected in pursuit of other dreams, being celebrated and loved despite her flaws and failures. We brought something special, Lily announced, placing a package in Eleanor's lap. Emma's idea. Eleanor carefully unwrapped the gift, her fingers working methodically despite their arthritic curves. Inside was a beautifully bound book, its cover embossed with the title, Weathered Grace, The Story of Eleanor Winters. What's this? She asked, opening to the first page where a photograph of the Coal Creek farmhouse greeted her. Your story, Emma explained, her expression a mix of pride and nervousness. I recorded our conversations last year, remember? The publisher loved it, said it was an important piece of American women's history. Eleanor stared at the book in disbelief. You wrote my life? No, Grandma, Emma corrected gently. You lived it. I just helped put it on paper so others could learn from your journey. As Eleanor turned the pages, seeing her experiences transformed into chapters with titles like Coal Dust and Dreams and The Glass Ceiling, tears welled in her eyes. The hardships, the triumphs, the mistakes, the resilience, all preserved not just in her aging memory, but in a form that would outlast her. People need to hear stories like yours, Lily said, resting a hand on her mother's shoulder. Especially now, when so many take for granted the opportunities you had to fight for. Eleanor closed the book and ran her hand over its cover, feeling the raised letters of her name. From the skinny girl collecting eggs in Coal Creek to the subject of a published memoir. Another turn in a life defined by unexpected journeys. Thank you, she said simply, looking from her daughter to her granddaughter, for seeing me. Really seeing me. As they settled in to share birthday cake and stories, Eleanor felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced before. Whatever came next, whether more years in this room with its thin curtains and morning light, or the great unknown that awaited all mortals, she was ready. Her story had been told. Her truth would remain. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. 83 years. A journey from coal dust to corner offices, from poverty to privilege. From a girl told what she couldn't do to a woman who defined success on her own terms. Eleanor Winter's story is not just about resilience in the face of hardship, but about the price of ambition, the complexity of choices, and the enduring human capacity to begin again, no matter how many times life demands it. As she closes her photo album and prepares to join her family for lunch in the retirement home's dining room, Eleanor carries with her the wisdom that only comes from a life fully lived, that our greatest strength lies not in never falling, but in rising, again and again, weathered but unbroken. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories. Also, do you like the Eleanor's journey? Join us at the comments.